We would be honored if you would join us.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dungeon Crawlers Radio. I am Krebs.
And I am Alton.
And we are joined here tonight with the famous, nay, the infamous Daniel Swenson. How you doing, buddy?
Yay, I gotta be infamous.
Yeah, you will know Daniel's voice because he is our intrepid leader. He is the one who runs DCR and has done so beautifully for years. But tonight, we get a special treat because tonight he is our guest. And what makes Daniel so special tonight, Alton? Tell the folks at home.
Well, some would say that occasionally he has a bit of a golden tongue, and others have waxed effuse of his various physical abilities and statures. But tonight we talk about the way he works his pen across the page. And in fact, recently, Daniel has been up for a particular award.
Quite a prestigious award, too, especially for a first-time author. Daniel, tell us about this award for which you've been nominated.
So, the Whitney Award. The Whitney Award's an award for LDS authors. So those... I don't even know how to go into an explanation about that. It's an award that is fairly big here in the Western states. I'll say it that way. And it is a award that you actually have to be nominated by readers to get a nomination in. Once you have the nomination, then it goes through a judging process to become a finalist, and then another judging process from there. So I got the email several months back saying, "Hey, you've been nominated for the Whitney Award," which was like, cool, that's awesome. There's people that actually liked my book and liked me, and But living in Utah, there is a giant pool or pond, a giant pond with tons of writers swimming around in it all the time. Many that are vastly bigger names than mine. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. I got a nomination, but I don't think it'll go very far beyond that. And then on February 3rd, they released the finalists. So, this is where they've narrowed it down to the top 5, and I happen to be one of those, which I was quite shocked. To be honest, I saw Larry Correa. It's like, yep, Larry, that makes sense. Jennifer Jenkins, yep, that makes sense. I don't know who these other two people are, but that probably makes sense too. And then there was my name, which was like, what? Really? I've always suffered from what is called imposter syndrome, just because I've done the podcast for years. Like you said, I'm working on year number 12. And during the process, I have learned how to write a very unique way. Everyone kind of comes into writing in their own way, but I have learned from the greatest, I guess is the best way to say it. Like R.A. Salvatore, Dave Farland, Brandon Sanderson, Larry Correa, the list goes on. All those guys have come on the show. We've always asked questions about writing, and I've gleaned that, that information bit by bit. And then one day someone said, hey, you do really great adventure stories when you do D&D or role playing. I'm pretty sure you could write a book. And I'm like, huh. I've always wanted to. As a kid, I used to write these crazy stories, and I'm just like, I think I'm going to do that. I went home. That was at a convention. It's an old convention that doesn't exist anymore. It was Conduit. It was Memorial Weekend. I went home and said, I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to have it done before Labor Day weekend. And I did.
Now, I want to stop you before we get too deep into your process, because I definitely want to dive into that and dissect that a little bit.
Sure.
But let's take a couple steps back for a second. So
yes,
you got the first of all, for which title, which book were you nominated?
So it's my second book, A Dragon's Fate, which was a really interesting story. I deviated a little bit from my original plans because my first book, it's definitely an urban military fantasy. You got military, guns, bombs, explosions, and dragons. How can you go wrong? Second book, I deviated a little bit from that by thinking, dragons are the keepers of magic. The dragons come back. Now magic slowly creeping back into the world. And not only that, there's this cabal that's been running around for centuries, pulling the strings of governments and organizations all over the world, plotting for something evil to happen. And they've been using magic and keeping magic for themselves. And so it just kind of spun from there. And it was really cool. Dragons are real. They've been around since the dinosaurs. The idea came to me because I watched this Discovery Channel thing where this archaeologist found this T-Rex that had claw marks on its skull and scorch marks. And he couldn't explain how they got there. There is no known dinosaur at that time that could jump that high. There is no known flying dinosaur that could create claw marks that big, let alone scorch marks. Because he's like, well, maybe he got hit with some burning tar, blah, or maybe some lava. And then he started thinking, well, what if it was a dragon? That kind of fits. And then I was thinking, I like that idea. I'm going to run with that.
And that's a really interesting thing. A lot of people find inspiration in unique places like that and draw from history and kind of the shared things that keep us up at night and are sometimes difficult to explain. And especially, I imagine, as you've worked with many of these different authors, excellent, by the way, all of them, you may find that sometimes some of the ideas or story threads that they leave open can lead to inspiration too. Is there anything that's particularly stood out in your readings and travels with working with other authors that helped you along this journey?
I read so much. Oh, okay. Let me roll that back. At this point, I'm listening to audiobooks a lot, but I used to read quite a bit. I love dragons. I pretty much own every Dragonlance novel in existence. There's maybe 5 that I don't have, if that. So early on, Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss were huge. Then I discovered R.A. Salvatore, and I own every book that he has ever written. I think they're all signed too. From there, I just have so many books. From there, the Sword of Truth series, the Shannara series, Brandon Sanderson and his Mistborn series. I mean, Dragons of Pern. I always have loved dragons, and there's just something about them that has always appealed to me and always spoke to me. And so when I sat down to write, that was the first thing that I had to have was a dragon. Growing up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, growing up, I've always tried to write like an epic fantasy. And for some reason, it just never came out right. So that's why I decided to go with the urban fantasy, because it just seemed right.
So without giving away spoilers, of course, to your 2 books, from your perspective, when you think of dragons and where kind of like how they view the world, how they view mankind, do dragons automatically see man as the enemy? Do dragons, find them to be cute like pets or annoying like pests? Or is there deeper consideration between the dragons and the humans, or are dragons just like natural bestial creatures?
I mean, that's a good question. So the first book has one dragon. The second book has another dragon. Basically, the creation tale I created is that there is this big, dark, mean entity that is out there in the darkness of space and time and other dimensions. And the powers of creation created dragons to guard Earth. Their original design was guardians. Their whole purpose was to protect all life on this planet. However, they were given magic to do this. Well, what happens with power? Power corrupts. So slowly, these dragons have twisted and turned, become greedy, become everything that you see from European dragons. They're evil, they're greedy, they're destructive. But their original intent was that they were guardians. They have a particular element that they are strong in, and their opposite element they can still use, but it takes more energy and power to control. So the first dragon we see in the first book is just mean, horrible, evil. The second dragon in the second book, which I really particularly like, is female and isn't really interested in destruction. She's more sly and seductive, and her intent is just to escape. She's imprisoned. And so I really enjoyed that character because it wasn't like, I'm going to destroy everything. You know, when the dragon finally escapes, it's, you know, it doesn't want to wreak havoc. All it wants to do is fly away and go hide again. And so I liked how that dichotomy was there, where it wasn't just dragons are horrible and evil. I mean, even the main character's like, this creature is just wanting to get away. Why are we attacking it? And so he ends up doing something, and things happen with that dragon in a much different way than in the first book, which I like. But then that leads kind of into the next book I am working on. So the third book is in the works, and it is coming slowly because I have a lot of things I'm doing, but it's definitely coming together.
You know, it's really interesting because by the way that you speak about these characters, it's clear that you have an affinity for them.
Yes.
And one of the things that I love talking to authors about is the characters with whom they share the most affinity, the pieces of themselves that they leave in their stories and in their characters. For you, you know, what is that hallmark character or characters, the pieces of yourself?
So the character that is most like me, I actually had someone ask me that question, and that would be Lenny. That would be my character, Lenny. Man, I just botched that. Lenny Kowalski. It is definitely a difficult name to pronounce, but Lenny has a bat cave. Lenny is obsessed with comic books. Lenny has a 5-year supply of Mountain Dew, but they don't make Mountain Dew anymore. The company went bankrupt because this is set a little bit in the future. And so he has this stockpile of Mountain Dew, and he covets it, you know. And there is like one scene that I had to put in the second book, where Henry, the main character, calls in, and it's a teleconference line, and Lenny is wearing a Batman cowl, you know, the mask and everything. And he's like, good God, Lenny, what are you wearing? And he's like, what? He's like, I can see you. He's like, oh crap. You know, the screen blacks out, and then it comes back on, and it's gone. I just love Lenny. And not only that, Lenny has some really cool moments where he surprises everyone. Because he grew up as this kid that always got beat up. And Henry and Rick, the two brothers in the series, were always there kind of to help him out. And as a kid, I was a short redhead, and there was a season in my life where I got beat up quite a bit. So I really feel like Lenny is that character that most reflects me.
So he's like your cathartic outlet.
Yeah, a little bit. But at the same time, I love how he has moments of heroism. You know, even though he's not muscular, he's not the guy that's going to run into battle first. But there is a moment towards the end of the first book. Excuse me. There is some moments in the second book, but there's a pivotal moment at the end of the first book where it seems like all is lost, and then Lenny saves the day. Then gets the crap beat out of him, but he saves the day. But at the end of the book, he gets kissed by the girl, so that's all that matters, I guess.
You know, and it's kind of interesting because I have known you, and Krebs has known you for years now. And hopefully we have some listeners out there who have followed since the beginning as well. And so we've been able to see kind of your personal character arc as you've been able to pursue these different passions and ideas. And but we often see characters in the books that we love grow with us as well. What is one of those things that you feel you have gained and grown through the process of writing this book, this award nominated book?
My writing has definitely improved. Everyone that I've talked to that's read the second book is like, wow, this is so much better than the first, which is great. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. Each book is better than the last. But definitely my editing, my writing prose, my writing style improved quite a bit. My storytelling ability improved. So those are all really great things that came out of the second book. Getting the nomination and then ultimately becoming a finalist helped me to move out of the I'm an imposter, swimming in this pond, to, wow, I'm actually just as good a writer as Larry Correia or Jennifer Jenkins or the other two authors that are even there. So that really helped me to grow quite a bit, because I know I've had several people like, yeah, you're just as good. But for some reason in our brains, that doesn't click until something like this happens.
I mean, you're at least in the top 5.
And even if I don't win, I'm okay with that. This is amazing just to be able to say, hey, my book's a finalist for this award. It's like years ago when Dungeon Crawlers was a finalist for the Hugo. I mean, that was just like mind-blowing. Like, I never once would I ever think that would happen. We've never been up for it again, but we were a Hugo finalist, and that's awesome. I mean, I can tote that around, yet I still don't. I don't know why. There's just something about me that I don't like to be I like to be humble. What is the opposite of humble?
Kardashian.
Yeah, Kardashian. I don't want to be that way.
Hey, don't bring Star Trek into this.
There's the sticker on each of our things, but we're not like toting around like, oh, hey, you should pay attention to us because we're a Hugo nominated podcast, or I'm now a finalist for the Whitney Award. And that means I'm super awesome. It's really cool. I feel like I'm now on an equal playing field in my mind with these other authors, and I can do some stuff now.
It's totally amazing. I remember when you first sent the message to Alton and I about being nominated, and I just about came out of my skin with joy of just like how exciting it was that you got nominated. Yeah. And you're over there like, yeah, it's kind of cool. It's kind of hard to believe, and you're just like so quiet and like subdued. But I was over here on my side of the internet fence, just like ooh-rahing, because it was just so cool that your book got nominated for this prestigious award. I realize it's local. I realize that it's targeting a very specific subset of authors. It doesn't change anything.
No, it doesn't.
This is an important and an impressive thing. You've got people like Tracy Hickman and Larry Correia who've won these awards in times past, and they're amazing authors.
Yeah, and you get Brandon Sanderson. Yeah.
Brandon Sanderson.
It is cool. I mean, don't get me wrong. Even though I was subdued, I definitely was like doing the happy dance, screaming and yelling, and like, holy crap.
I'd like to back up to for a second to something that Alton asked. I want to kind of modify. I want to piggyback off of the previous question. He asked you like, which character do you see yourself in, and things like that. And I'm kind of curious, especially if it's not Lenny, was there a character that like you really wanted to get back to writing for? There was a character that you loved writing for, and alternately, was there a character you hated writing for, or a character that like, for whatever reason, I don't want to load the question. Was there a character that you loved writing for? Was there a character that you hated writing for?
So I'm probably going to get in trouble for this one. So one character I really, really love to write shows up in the second book. His name is Marcus Silver. For those of you that don't know, Scott made this little movie called Ghostbusters of Salt Lake. His character's name is Marcus Silver.
That's awesome.
Varen, that used to be on the show, is also in the book as well. And let's just say that Varen told me a lot of funny, interesting stories about him and Scott that may have snuck their way into the book. His character was fun to write because I could, as I'm writing it, I could hear Scott's voice and Scott's personality in my head. So it really helped with that character. So that was really fun to write. But I also did it in a way that, wasn't making fun of Scott, and it wasn't in a disgraceful way. But it was just really fun. one character that was really hard for me to write was actually in the second book. It's Mrs. Cohen Brown. She is one of the Cabal, and she is devious as all can be. And there is this scene where she poisons the CEO of this organization, the CEO of Union Forest. And just how cold and calculating she is was really hard to write, because this guy is literally choking and dying at her feet, and she just doesn't care. And that's just not me. I'm definitely a caring person. I can't be that cold and calculating. But it was hard. It was hard to write that character, but it was, in the end, I think it was really rewarding because I was able to pull it off. But hey, I also know interesting facts about poison that no one really should ever know.
That brings us to another question of what kind of research did you have to do for each of these books?
For like the first book, I had to do a lot of research on weapons. What type of fire rate, how did they have clips in them, how far certain weapons could fire, what the impact, how hard did they impact when they hit something, like moving, flesh compared to a moving vehicle, what type of vehicles were out there, what kind of even futuristic type of technology, medical technology as well. And then I had, I've never been to Ireland, but I set, I'd say at least half the book was in Ireland. And I used Google Earth like crazy and every website I could imagine just to learn everything I could about Ireland, what type of animals were there, what type of trees and fauna that I could find, just so I could make it as realistic as possible. Then moving to the second book, I had to learn more about bombs and explosives and poisons and just other really interesting facts. Like, I've never been to Central Park, but I had to know every detail and spec of Central Park, which I hope to go there and experience it. But, you do have to do a lot of research because otherwise, if your readers can tell.
Yeah.
So that's a great way. Those of you who are listening in Ireland or New York and have an extra couch or a bunk somewhere, this is a great time to send in a message and let us know so we can book Daniel to come out and sign.
No, seriously.
Yes.
Ardmore, Ireland is where a good portion of the first book is set. That would be so awesome to be able to go there to Ardmore and like, hey, here's the book. That's, because looking at their wiki page, they're like, yeah, one other book was written about our little town, and that's cool. Well, here's another one. A lot of stuff happens in Manhattan. Almost if you look at a map, especially with Marvel, almost every Marvel character is based in Manhattan. It seems like.
Yeah, so true.
So me writing something there isn't that big of a deal. But hey, it's overrun. It's not. No one can live there because there's giant sewer rats and other creatures living. Oh, and giant dire wolves. Yeah.
Were there? The danger of writing any work of fiction is that you're going to step on the toes of giants, right? That you're going to. We're so heavily influenced by what we might consider the classics of fantasy and sci-fi. Were there any particular tropes or patterns that you were hoping to avoid in your novels?
Yeah, I mean, magic. Magic is, there's several books about it. Everyone has a different magic system. Brandon Sanderson, all of his magic systems are based in reality and physics. You've got like Dragonlance and, all of Bob Salvatore's books where it's just magic exists and it does this and that. I kind of wanted magic to be kind of a combination of that and a Green Lantern power ring. Whatever you could imagine, you can make happen. There is one point in the second book where Henry fires a normal gun, but he is able to infuse. Well, it's a grenade launcher. He fires it at these dire wolves. He's able to infuse magic into that grenade he fires off. And you'll have to read the book to find out what happens. But let's just say it was not a small explosion. And then there's another point where, he's able to do some things that are, it's cool, it's magic, but it's definitely not traditional magic, and that's what I wanted to kind of avoid, is just, oh yeah, he can just say some words and it happens. It's not really that. He has to visually think of it in his mind. There is some words that he does say. For those of you that know Latin, hey, you're going to know what all the magic spells say, because the few times that it is said, it's all in Latin. I chose that as my magic language.
Excellent. So how to say this next one? You're working on your third book.
Yes.
Your voice changed. Your writer's voice changed.
Yes.
Or at the very least refined between the first book and the second book. One could surmise that your third book would show a little additional refinement, because this is kind of a new endeavor for you.
Yeah.
I know it's not typical in works of fiction to do this, but have you considered what it would mean to revisit the first book and create a second edition, perhaps with quote unquote deleted scenes and things of that nature? I don't want to go too George Lucas on this, but have you thought about like refining the first work?
McClunky.
I think Orson Scott Card said it best. The book's done. I'm moving on. To go back, every author would prefer to do that. Go back, refine it, make it better. But if we did that all the time, we'd constantly be doing that and never be able to leave that book. So I feel okay. It's the first book. It's going to have its issues. Maybe one day I'll clean it up a little bit, but I definitely don't want to rewrite. I don't want to do the George Lucas thing where things get so changed it's not really the same. Yes, Han shot first, and if you watch
Truth.
Disney Plus, they both fire at the same time now. What the heck? But I don't really want to do that. If anything, it would just be some cleanup, and I'll leave it as it is. I think it is good. It's a good story. And I just want to move forward. I want to be able to add more to the story and the universe. As it is, the third book has some really cool things that are going to happen in it. The creature that is in the void, it has found a way to Earth, and now we just have to see if his plans come to fruition, or if Henry and his brother and the other guys can stop it. That's kind of where we're heading. And the closest way to describe this thing out in the void is it's an old ancient one. Something like Cthulhu that's out there in the darkness, or Dormammu. It's just waiting to come and devour all life and light.
So that's always an interesting thing too, that some authors really, really love writing their villains and their monsters, write the unknowables and the hard to describes. And so for you, when you started this process, did you have a really clear identity for that being, or is that something that has grown and evolved as you've explored the universe?
Yeah, so I'm a pantser, so I don't outline, I don't do any of that. I just kind of write, and what comes out is what happens. I didn't really discover the whole meaning of this otherworldly creature till about halfway through the second book. The first book I wrote in a way that it could stand on its own. It could be a standalone, and we're good. And that way I could get picked up by a publisher. After that, I didn't really think that there was going to be a second book. I was going to write another book. Then on my way to FanX one morning, I pretty much plotted the entire second book in a car ride from my house in Saratoga Springs to Salt Lake. I just turned the audio recorder on and I just started talking. Had it all plotted out. I'm like, all right, I guess I'm supposed to work on this book.
And for people who are not from Utah, that's about a half-hour drive is all.
Yeah, so not very long. So in 30 minutes, I had it all plotted out. I knew that dragons were guardians of this planet, and they had, like I already said, that they had been twisted because of magic and things like that.
When you say that dragons are guardians, that would then suppose that there is an ongoing thread. If the dragons were either created and or bequeathed with, they were created as creatures, they were bequeathed with magic from powers on high.
Yeah.
What's the opposition then, and where does that opposition come from?
So the opposition is this ancient old one that's out there. I like Eastern culture with what they do with their dragons. They're guardians, they're creatures of fortune. They're not this negative entity that's out there. But I love the look of European dragons. They look mean and vicious and evil, and the horns and everything. It's spectacular and stunning, and they're super destructive when they want to be. So I kind of meshed the two together. And then I came up with this idea because, there's always that balance of light and darkness. So light is the powers of creation. Darkness is the powers of destruction, which is this old one that's been trapped out there. And so, Earth was created, life has sprung up on it, and to be able to protect that life, the dragons were created to bring that balance. They were there to teach humanity, usher them along. And so, at one point they worked side by side with humans. And this idea came about because every culture on this planet has a myth about dragons. And it's like, okay, how can that be? For centuries or more, we didn't communicate with one another. So how could all of these cultures, ancient ones and new, have myths about dragons? It just didn't make sense unless they existed. And so that's kind of where this idea evolved from. And then it's like, okay, so as their numbers dwindled, they gained more power, that power corrupted, and so on and so forth. Not only that, but this creature, this entity, has been slowly been able to get more and more of a handhold on the planet and in magic, and has been twisting the dragons to its own uses and demise. And then it's discovered that the only way it can break through is by obtaining 7 hearts of these guardians. So that's its purpose, is to kill these dragons and take their hearts, and then have one of its followers cast this spell and allow it to come into this realm.
So that's kind of an interesting concept there. And obviously, I don't want to distract you from finishing your 3rd book, but have you considered kind of what comes next, if it becomes popular or if it doesn't become popular? What's kind of your end game?
I don't know quite yet. I don't know if it's going to wrap up in 3 books or if it's going to go beyond that. I do know there are other stories that I want to write, maybe in novella format. There is a really cruel, evil villain in the 2nd book. Her name is Shanti. She's an really old Chinese woman, and she wasn't always that way. And I would really love to go back and tell her story of how she became the way she was. Because she ends up dying in a battle and makes a deal with this creature, and it brings her back to life. And her whole point is to, find these guardians and get their hearts. And she is just mean. If you can think of the worst old lady on the planet, give her a dagger that instantly kills anyone it touches. Like, it's like Artemis Entre's dagger with an old grumpy woman. Some kid walks across her lawn and she just jumps out and stabs him. She doesn't yell at him. She just stabs and kills him immediately. And their entire body turns to ash. So there is nothing left behind that can incriminate her. That's pretty much this character.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's ferocious. I kind of want to push on this button a little bit more. I like the question that Alton asked, which is, you've got this trilogy that you're setting up, or more. Perhaps you plan it to be more than a trilogy in terms of number of books. But outside of this story, whether it's in the same universe or not, have you considered the next major work that you want to work on?
See, I've already started. Well, I've co-written another book with another author. We already had the 1st book done and the 2nd book on the way. It's a middle grade book, and it has dragons in it. It is about a young boy that is afraid of dragons because he believes that dragons like to eat redheaded children because they taste like ginger snap cookies.
Not false, by the way. That's absolutely true.
So
to dragons, nobody out there go eat a ginger.
Right, right.
So it was a really fun book to write. Jody and I are both fellow redheads. So we put in every redheaded thing that we could think of in there, and it was just lots and lots of fun. It's based in Scotland, so hopefully one day I can go there. But it was definitely different. It's different going from an adult style book to a middle grade book where I went from third person to first person, and it's just this 12-year-old kid. And I pulled a lot from my 12-year-old son because I haven't been 12 in forever. And when I was 12, they didn't have everything that they have now. And so I'm trying to think as this 12-year-old kid. He loves to eat cookies. He loves to eat sweets. He likes playing video games. And yes, he plays Star Wars video games. Is a huge Star Wars geek. So is his buddy. But he's afraid of dragons. And he believes there is a dragon hunting him down. And it was so much fun. It was just so much fun. I mean, there's even this weird scene where the headmaster of the school, he walks in and he's playing with his toys and then quickly shoves them into a drawer. A little bit like Rick Moranis on Spaceballs.
That's exactly what came to mind.
Like Wash from Firefly, except they're not dinosaurs. But it was lots of fun to write that. There was a bully picking on him. He we did have a Falcor moment, so I pulled a little bit reference there from Neverending Story. The headmaster was a little bit like Dumbledore in a way, being sneaky and pushing him into doing something he didn't, the character didn't really want, kind of like what Dumbledore did with Harry. So we had a lot of fun. And the second book, they're at summer camp. What can go wrong at summer camp? Except for summer camps on the shore of Loch Ness.
Yeah. So we've already, we've already touched a little bit on Dan's humility. We've touched in many episodes on his generosity and kindness to other people. Having been a fan of the show for a long time, as things have started to get back up, it's been nice to be able to come on and be a participant in this. And any of you who have ever met Dan, I'm sure have had good experiences where you've seen the way that he invites you in and tries to make you a part of what's going on. And so this is a great opportunity, I think, to ask Dan, since you've now taken the time to write these first two books, it sounds like there are many other projects on the way. What is the biggest thing that you want somebody to feel or experience or take away as they enter your worlds?
If they enter my worlds, that's a huge question. Which I don't think I've ever thought of. I've always known how I feel when I read someone else's book. I want to be entertained when I read their book. I want to be able to kind of set aside my worries and journey through that world just for the short time I'm there, and be able to go back. I can't tell you the number of times I've read my books, and it's not because I bought it so I should read it. It's because I want to go back. I want to go back on that journey, and I hope with those individuals that are reading my books, that's kind of the experience they have. They're able to put aside their cares, their worries, for a small moment in time, enjoy the journey that they're on, and want to come back. Because ultimately, that's what it's all about. That's why we watch, our favorite movie over and over, because we get to set aside time and experience that journey all over again. I have probably watched A New Hope more than 100 times, and it still is just as fun as the first time. Yes, my kids say, ew, gross, when Luke, Leia kisses Luke, but she didn't know. They're swinging over this giant chasm.
Knew.
Yeah.
No one knew.
No one did, but it's still amazing. It's still fun. I still want to throw 3PO in a trash compactor, but that's okay.
Now, I had a question and then I spaced it. Hang on a sec. We'll cut that part out or leave it in. Whatever.
We'll leave it in. Whatever.
Leave it in. Leave everything in. Everything's a keeper. Here we go. Where can we find your books? Like, what are they called? Where can we find them?
Okay.
How can we support your endeavor?
So the first book is called The Shadow Above the Flames. You can find that on Amazon, or you can find it on my website, which is adragonsfate.com. The second book is A Dragon's Fate. No. My website is Dragon's Fate. Leave out the A. Dragonsfate.com. So both books are on my website, or you can go to Amazon. Look either of them up, or just look up Daniel Swenson. That's Swenson. My author page has that. There is a short story in a book called Choose Your Own Apocalypse I have. It's called, it again is about dragons. Every story in that book is a world-ending event. There is an apocalyptic story about a necktie that ends the world. There's my dragon story. There's another one that is a computer one. There is a redneck barbecue that goes wrong. There are a bunch of different stories in that book. The other one is, it is a collection of stories for Valkyria. I can't even remember the name of it because I know they're rebranding it. I'm going to pull it up real quickly because I don't remember. That's how awesome my memory is right now. The funny thing is I wrote my first book first and then came back because I sent it to one of my author friends. Like, hey, how do you like this? Valkyria Awakenings, that's what it is. I'm like, is this okay? And he's like, wow, this was amazing. You want to write a short story for my anthology? I'm like, sure. So, yeah. I had to read his entire book in 2 weeks and then start writing the story, which that one is a really fun story. It is a high fantasy story, so I got to kind of go to my roots, my reading roots, and wrote that. And I will admit, I did pull a little bit of some inspiration from the Avatar cartoon series because I got to pick an elemental power for him, and totally enjoyed writing that character. He's 14, and there's something about tragedy, but I killed his mother right in front of his eyes. Not expecting to do that, but I did it. And he snaps and he gets his power at that point. Before he didn't know he had power. He's being hunted, and it was a really cool moment, and I enjoyed writing that story.
Well, most authors are just murderers who are able to get away with the crime in front of millions of witnesses.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and the body count. The body count's kind of high in my two books. I got a dragon that gets to destroy an entire nation. It's kind of cool.
So yeah, now everybody knows where they can find you. If you haven't already navigated over there, go and do it right now. Take the time to help support Daniel, and in doing so, you're helping to grow our communities and expand our horizons, both as authors and as consumers of content. So,
yes. And I was just going to add to that. It's really, this is one thing that's always important. Leave reviews. Reviews are the lifeblood of any author. And, if you're going to leave a negative one, make it constructive. Don't just say, wow, this sucks. This is horrible, blah, blah, blah. Say why. What is it that you didn't exactly like? Because that helps. I mean, if you're just going to be a jerk, that's not helpful. But if you're going to admit that you didn't like it, that's okay. It's not going to hurt my feelings. But tell me why. Exactly. What were the things that you didn't miss? Like I had one guy who said, wow, this has so many plot holes in it. I just can't enjoy this. Well, those plot holes were filled up in book 2. There's a reason I ignored that, because it's a big part of book 2. So, and there's, I don't know if that person's like, oh crap, I feel crappy for leaving that review now. Yeah, it's okay. Just say why. There was a couple of reviews that I saw that I'm like, oh, I did miss that. I think I need to fix it. And I did in book 2. Yeah, so be constructive. That always helps authors, and leave reviews, because how is anyone going to know that the book is good or anything like that if people don't leave reviews? So
Absolutely.
leave reviews and be kind. That's all I can say. And if you really do hate it really, really bad and can't be constructive, just don't leave a review. Just go somewhere else. Do something else. Be happy. Go pet a puppy. Eat some sugar. Go see a good movie.
Absolutely.
I don't know what else to say.
Or listen to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers.
There's always that.
Listen to another episode of our show. That's always good. And beyond that, like with anything I do, I mean, the biggest reason I started the show was because I wanted to be able to help people. That's always been my underlying thing. With bringing authors on, authors always need help. They always need people to hear about their books. Game designers, the same thing. That's the underlying theme that has always been with the show, is to help other people. And with writing, it's no different. There are moments you can read something out of a book and go, wow, that really pertains to me in this moment. I can't tell you the number of times I have read a book and I'm just like I'm filling in the dumps, or it's been a crappy day, or I'm struggling with X, Y, or Z, and I read something and I'm like, huh, wow, that really pertains to how I'm feeling in this moment. Okay, awesome. I'm going to go away with this, and I'm going to make today better. You never know. That's one thing. That's another thing that came to mind, that I hope that if my readers are reading the book, that there is that moment when something is like that and they take away something and you're like, wow, okay, I'm going to make today better, by a bit of dialogue or something. So with that said, there it is.
That's fantastic, Dan. That's excellent. And one more time, if you want to check out the books that Daniel has written, you can go to dragonsfate.com and you can see the cover art and the descriptions there. And you can also purchase them at amazon.com as well. Yep. That is our time tonight. Daniel, you've been a fantastic guest. You've been hosting for so long, and now you finally get to have practice as a guest. Good on you.
Yay, I get to be a guest. It's weird being a guest on my own show.
Isn't it, though? But you know
what?
It's wonderful to finally get to pick your mind a little bit. You're always so busy delving into the thought processes and the motivations and the emotions of your guests. It's fine. It's a wonderful experience to finally get to kind of turn the tables and get to learn a little bit more about you.
No, I agree. It's something I need to do better. Bob Defendi, another guest that's been on the show many times, good friend. He listens to the show, and one day, I was at FanX, and he's like, you want to know what? I'm like, what? He's like, I know everything about your co-hosts. I know every time they've had a bad day. I know everything they're doing. And he's like, but I don't know a lot about you. He's like, and that's not a bad thing, but it shows how great of an interviewer you are. You're like secretly interviewing your co-hosts as we're moving along through our shows. But no one's doing it back to you. So I have no clue what's going on. But, behind the eyeballs or whatever there. Because just in past, it's never been that, and I've never really pushed that. But I realize I need to do that more. Just because, it's like I became an author, and probably a lot of our listeners never really knew that. It was something we just kind of mentioned on the side and didn't go beyond that. And that's something that definitely has to change, because everyone has their things, and it's exciting to talk about various projects that each of us are doing. And I don't like being, I don't like saying, oh, hey, guess what, guys? I wrote a book. No, that's just not me. But, it is cool that I wrote a book, and I'm super excited that there are certain people that have seen it, that have read it. One of the coolest moments of being an author is when I got to send my book to R.A. Salvatore and say, hey, would you read it? He's like, sure. I've read him for years. And he's like, sure, I'll do that. And it's just really cool to have those type of moments.
Absolutely. And your second book in this series is nominated for the Whitney Award.
Yep.
By the
And
way,
a
when do the awards actually get assigned? You're
So
nominated.
I
When do we know?
finally get to find out if I win on May 8th. So
May
I have to
8th.
wait till May.
You have to wait for 4 days
Yeah.
after Star
So
Wars Day.
at least I get to celebrate Star Wars Day in some fashion, and maybe we should take a guy's trip to Disneyland. Build
Whatever.
build
Whatever.
lightsabers and stuff like that. And then come back and then I find out if I win this award or not. But either way, it is awesome. I appreciate the fact that I was nominated. For those readers that did nominate me, I appreciate the fact for those judges that selected me as a finalist. It's just really cool.
It is super cool,
Yeah.
and we're pulling for you, and I'm sure our audience is pulling for you. This is great.
And
So
all I can say,
congratulations.
and all I can say to the audience is definitely, reading is awesome. Whether it's audiobooks or sitting down and reading a book, do it. Take the time. One thing that I have learned over my lifespan is it definitely reduces stress. You could have the world's most stressful day, and sitting down with a book or even listening to an audiobook immediately drops your stress levels by 40%. So that's just amazing.
Well, take that little piece of advice with you, folks at home. And Daniel, thank you very much for being an amazing guest. And until next time, thank you for listening to Dungeon Crawlers Radio. And remember to always be epic and don't suck.
And I guess we'll see you next time, because that next time I won't be a guest.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.